Innovation is in our veins. Soon the whole world will know our names. Sharing our knowledge and freedom reign. We here for the people, you know it's our way. Setting foundations is part of the dream. It doesn't matter if you're new to the game. Listen up now, cause we all gon' say, elevate, 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 higher, elevate, 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 higher. We gon' rise up, we all gon' shine. Work through adversity, stay on the grind. Elevate, elevate, this is our time. Elevate, elevate.
Welcome to the Elevate Podcast, everyone. It's so great to have you all on one more time. It's your boy Josh.
And Reg.
And we're grateful to be back on with you yet again. We have an action-packed episode. We are grateful you brought us. We were with you last week. We had some great 2 episodes with you. Well, today, we are getting into the heavier stuff, the stuff that we've been kind of not really want to talk about. But, you know, the conflict has come home. We have issues happening here in this country, various hot pockets, hot spots of just issues, problems, conflict happening on other parts of the globe that's now made its way here. And we're going to be talking about that today. And we're coming from a perspective of not allowing to change your perspective, not allowing to change who you are in your humanity. And that's what we're going to be hitting on today. Reg, how you feeling, big dog?
Pretty good. I had to laugh there for a second when you said hot pockets. I was like, hot pockets are joyful, though.
Hot pockets.
Hot spots, not so much. But doing pretty good. Kind of had some fun tonight. My daughter, we always read her The Very Hungry Caterpillar before bed. And I was trying to read it upside down because her mom was holding her. And I was reading from above. And I couldn't read some of the words because they were just weird on the page. And I'm still waiting on my glasses to come in. But that's another thing. Anyway, so I was just making up my own stuff for The Very Hungry Caterpillar. The Very Hungry Caterpillar was obese at one point and needed some Ozempic, but couldn't access any.
Wow, you started making it all up.
Yeah, there's like one page where he eats through all these different things, and I was like, oh, and then he ate through the glizzy, and Jen is looking at me, she's like, what are you saying? Like, it's like, I'm introducing her to the Gen Z lingo. Like, she's going to know this better than us.
The glizzy.
Anyway, we had a good time. It got to the point where her and I were laughing so much that, like, you know, Adele started laughing too. So I was like, okay, good. This was a good bedtime.
We're here for the laughter, man.
Oh yeah. So gotta keep the small things keeping you going, right?
Totally, absolutely, and I don't blame you, especially the type of weekend we had. Obviously, happy Remembrance Day, everybody. I hope you were able to kind of pay your respects where you're able to, and because of that, Remembrance Day was spicy this year. Mm-hmm. Not just here in the country, but we saw issues with Veterans Day in the States, or Remembrance Day over in the UK, with this crazy conflict that's happening with Israel-Hamas. The tides are turning in terms of what seems to be public opinion on this current war. And people who have immigrated from these places are now living here, which is awesome. We're here to offer the Canadian dream. We want you to have that. But the problem is the conflicts that they grew up with, they've now brought here and are at war and at battle with people who also live here, who believe the opposite of what they believe. And we are seeing a spike, I would say, in hate crimes happening on both sides. We're having issues with Muslim people, crimes against Muslim people, crimes against Jewish people. And in Montreal itself, there's this report of 36 hate crimes and incidents since the beginning of the Israel-Hamas war within like a couple weeks. And it's not just like, oh, yeah, someone said something negative. It's like, no, like, you know, you have full-on Nazi graffiti being, you know, spray-painted places. In this case, we have had an issue of a couple different scenarios where it says the National Council of Canadian Muslims told CTV News on Thursday that her organization has been getting more calls from Muslim students who feel unsafe on university campuses across Canada. One tense interaction, this one against Israel, was shared on social media this week at McGill University after a security guard was filmed ripping up posters of missing Israeli citizens. Whew.
Yeah.
There's a lot.
I don't know if you saw, but there's also reports of Jewish schools and Jewish synagogues, like them finding bullets like lodged into the sides of the building. Just wild. And it's just like, what purpose is that serving? Mm-hmm. Like, how is that helping anyone? Like, you're just adding hate to more hate. Like, that's not making anybody sympathetic to any cause at all. It's like, it's not even doing anything. Absolutely. That's the part that I'm just kind of frustrated by. It's like, like, you know, spraying a Nazi symbol on something, like, it's not helpful. Like, if you're out there protesting, like, I've already said, like, I don't know if that's actually going to do anything, just because of the way that Canada is kind of viewed on the world stage. Unfortunately, like, our reputation is at an all-time low because of the actions of our current government. So I don't know if political action is in the form of protests and things like that is actually going to move the needle in Canada. But what really doesn't move the needle is this kind of just like mindless hate. It's not useful to anyone. It doesn't serve anyone. And it just makes people more angry on the ground here.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a third side to all this that kind of got pulled in this past weekend, where you had some, at various points, war memorials and other pieces that were vandalized throughout the UK, Canada, of, you know, Flanders fields, poppies, these types of symbols were defaced because of, you know, the actions, as you said, of our government, who was just following America into all this stuff with Israel. And it brought the normal Canadians out now, who are really frustrated and who are now upset at people from Palestine, upset, in some cases, people from Israel. And now you have three factions who are ticked off at each other. And as I said, this is not helpful. And these are not great things. And all I saw this weekend through Twitter was just craziness after craziness after craziness of just absolute mindless violence, hatred, vitriol, people spewing at their fellow human being. And let's say I wasn't the most fired up reading all of it. I wasn't excited. This isn't the promise of Canada that I knew growing up. And just seeing so much hatred coming out of humans, especially in this country, when we're supposed to be seen as the haven in the West, supposed to be a place for peace and love and acceptance. And we seem to be losing that. I wasn't excited to see all this.
No, it's tiring, right? It's exhausting when you're seeing all this all the time. It does make you just kind of like almost check out a bit. I noticed and it's almost like a protection mechanism, just because you're seeing it and you're like, we had talked last week about locus control. This is out of my locus of control. And I can't do anything about what's happening in Palestine and Israel. Like that's a mess that's been going on for a century, or like centuries, I should say. And it was interesting because today I was watching some videos on it, and some of the rhetoric that Netanyahu is actually using, he's pulling verses from like 1st and 2nd Samuel, like talking about like stamping out like the Palestinians and leaving no person left. And it's just like, and that's what you're seeing happening right now. It's like anybody who says that this isn't, you know, fueled by religion and Zionism and just that whole mess of things, it's like, I don't know what you're looking at. But the problem is that exactly what you said, when it comes back home, it's like, it's one thing for that to be a mess there, but like, there's no Israel and Palestine in Canada. We're Canadians. When you came here, you said you wanted to be a part of Canada. You wanted to be a part of the social fabric. You wanted to integrate into a society that is accepting of all religions. So you have to kind of leave that at the door. And what happens is that, like, when people don't, then you do get that third group. And then what happens is when that third group gets loud enough, they say, kick everybody out. I'm tired of this mess in my front door. Kick everybody out. The party's over. Tired of it. And so that's where it kind of gets a little dicey, but I can't say that I don't feel that a little bit. Not that I'm saying that anybody should be kicked out by any means, but I empathize with that mindset. Do I think that's the right course of action? No, but I understand where it comes from.
Yeah, and I'm hearing it more too, specifically south of the border at the moment, where obviously Donald Trump has come out and said that if you are in any of these demonstrations that's causing any havoc or violence, when I'm in power, we're deporting you. DeSantis said something very similar in the debates. Nikki Haley, not fired up about her rhetoric, where her exact words were, if I was in power, I would tell Netanyahu, finish them, or her exact words.
Oh my God.
And stuff like that is just head scratching, right?
Yeah.
And these are the people that are getting closest to that ultimate seat of power. And it's concerning. And so, and one person I thought was a bit of breath of fresh air was Vivek Ramaswamy. In these debates, a lot of these different Republican nominees were taking the stance of kick them all out, like you said, deport them all. Anyone who's causing a problem, gone. And Ramaswamy's like, I disagree with that.
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to really, really hit home the message of America, the promise that America is supposed to be. The message isn't to censor. Then you're no different than what the Democrats are currently doing.
Yep.
And I thought that was I think he said it better than even what I said just now, but like that was the Cole's notes of what he said, but he said it in a very pristine way, which I thought I appreciated.
Yeah, because it's a call to unity. It's a call to like nationalistic in the sense of like, here's the national pride that we all aspire to, of being open, of being tolerant, of being kind to your neighbors, to being compassionate to your community. And it's like, and if you're not living up to those values, it's like you're not positively contributing to the community.
Totally.
So yeah, like I said, I don't know if deport everybody's the way to do it, but I do think that the way to do it is to be pushing for unity and pushing for stronger Canadian values in that sense. The problem is we don't have a good, strong leadership to do that. And I think what happens is that when you have important values like this, I think that you need strong leadership at the top to be an exemplar of that. And right now we kind of have a government that is all talk and show and no substance. So I think that's where we're running into some challenges right now.
Yeah, and I don't disagree. That's part of the reason why we're seeing so much chaos is because we have a lack of leadership.
Mm-hmm.
We have a man in power who's very weak, not afraid to say the wrong thing, as we see even here. Let's talk about like I was going to try and drum this up. No, just listen to this. This is obviously those who know what's going on. You've heard this before, but this is Justin Trudeau currently addressing the quote unquote ceasefire he's requesting to the press.
We need to see a cease. We need to see a humanitarian pause so we can flow. We need to see ceasing of the levels of violence that we're seeing. We need.
It's juice box, water bottles, like the thing all over again. It's a man who gets up there and he's like, can I say that word? No, I can't say that word. Oh crap, this is live. And just like word vomit. Like that's what that is. It's like, bro, I've seen people having a stroke that perform better than that. But yeah, I have to laugh. But it's realizing there's certain buzzwords that you can say and that you can't say. It's like, just come on, man.
Yeah.
You're killing us here.
And this is the reason, it kind of brings back to this, what you brought up earlier in the episode, where there's a reason Canada is being left out of specific meetings with the West.
Mm-hmm.
It's because of crap like this. This guy doesn't know what he's doing. He remembers he was in a meeting and he knew that the only thing he couldn't say was ceasefire. I guarantee he was in a meeting saying we cannot request a ceasefire, but we can kind of get around it a little bit, skirt around the bush, dress it up like we were really calling for something of like this to end, but we can't say ceasefire. So this man said, we want to cease something.
Humanitarian pause.
Oh my goodness gracious. Cease the end of the violence. What, like, oh my, go home. So this is the problems that we have, right? And we have weak leadership. We got people coming who are now just, when you have a lack of leadership, what happens? People feel like, well, we're on our own. What happens when people feel like they're on their own and they start feeling desperate? They start getting violent. They start lashing out, and that's what we're starting to see.
Mm-hmm.
People are scared. People are fearful.
People are making their own rules is the thing, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
like, well, Ottawa isn't listening to us. And I think that's the biggest thing that I'm kind of concerned about right now when I'm watching politics is just this idea that Ottawa isn't listening to us, because you do have an overwhelming majority of Canadians calling for a ceasefire. like an overwhelming amount of people calling for a ceasefire. And the other thing that you see is you also see an overwhelming amount of people calling for an end to the carbon tax on home heating fuels of all various types. All the premiers got together. They all agreed this would probably be helpful to Canadians going through a Canadian winter. Like, it's different topics. It's like social justice issues like this. It's like actual physical Maslow's hierarchy of needs, bottom level of shelter issues that you're seeing. And he's just like all over the map on all of them. And so when the Canadian public is looking at this, we've lost faith in our leadership. Then you have new people who've, immigrated within the past like 5 years looking at this going, oh, well, if the, born and raised Canadians aren't respecting their leadership, then we're not either. So then it's just a free for all. And then you get just like this weird division and political unrest and disunity across the country. And it's just, we're in a mess right now. And I worry about what state the next government's going to get of Canada, that they're going to have to try and sort this out and put it back together again. I was reading something this morning on, I think it was the CBC, when they were talking about, it was an opinion piece on Canada being broken and how they don't want to label Canada as broken anymore because they're worried about it being a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I get that. You tend to fall into the things you speak. They do become real. But the problem is that there's also calling a spade a spade. It's like when things are actually broken, need fixing, to kind of try and whitewash it isn't helpful to anyone. But yeah, I really think that there needs to be some kind of other mechanism when the Canadian public is this unhappy with their government, that they can call for some kind of change in government. When you have all of the premiers of the provinces and territories getting together and agreeing, like even Quebec agreeing, Quebec and Alberta at the same table agreeing on something, it's just like, this is wild. Like, times are tough.
True.
But like when you have all those people in power coming together and agreeing, and then you have the entire Canadian public going, like the majority of the Canadian public going, something needs to change. This is a problem. We're very unhappy. And there's no mechanism for accountability there. That's a problem that needs to change. And I think that would be something that would actually restore people's faith in our government system. Because right now we preach democracy, but this doesn't feel very democratic.
Oh, definitely not. It's you're going to take this no matter what you care about. Not very democratic, not on the values that I've understood that this country is built on. And this comes back to now, we've just kind of been talking about facts. What's going on? It's depressing. And we just are in the state, or I should say I'm in the state where I want just kind of like, call a spade a spade, where things are at, and how now, from what I'm reading on a higher level, just be cautious of what could be happening as an overarching theme. So again, people know who've been listening to the show, you know how we feel about the World Economic Forum. We have talked about it exhaustively. But there's just clips, things I've watched over the years that just start coming ringing true as I start seeing all of the chaos happening in the world, the various wars and the people coming in, or just like lots of pockets of conflict within our countries and in different regions. I'm reminded of videos like this, of Klaus Schwab being on CNBC and talking about what to expect moving forward with the world that we're in.
Out in November. But what we know is that we will end up with many more unemployed, and particularly also people in the grey economy, which are not counted for, who lose their jobs. So we will see definitively a lot of anger already now, but probably increased by the end of the year, because this crisis will be with us until we really have found a remedy. So
again, this was a video that kind of was aired back in 2020. This was right before the election between Biden and Trump. That was the height of a lot of issues. People were having problems with the lockdowns and the vaccines, that the other. So there was a lot of kind of allusions to that and people getting angrier. And it's only gotten more sense. Mm-hmm. And it's like, yeah, until we find a remedy, until we find the solution, until someone finds a solution, this is going to continue to happen. You're going to say something.
Oh yeah. Well, I was just thinking like, just a side note, this isn't useful for anybody, but doesn't he make like the perfect like Bond villain? Like he's like, oh, everybody is angry. You know, I'm here to create solution. And then you're like,
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good.
I don't know if I want your great reset. It's not seeming so fun for us serfs.
Yeah, exactly. And then it reminded me of this other clip that this was a post from 2016 from the World Economic Forum of the 8 predictions for the world in 2030. And I'm just going to kind of fast forward to like reasons 4 through 25 or 4 through 8 was so the reason number 5, or sorry, prediction number 5, I should say, is 1 billion people will be displaced by climate change. Is what they're saying. And we're gonna let this video play out a little bit, and we'll have to do a better job at welcoming and integrating refugees. They say that's gonna happen a lot more. Polluters will have to pay to emit carbon dioxide. There will be a global price on carbon. This will help make fossil fuels history. And then number 7, you could be preparing to go to Mars. Hey, we love to see Mars.
That's fun. That's exciting.
Scientists will have worked out how to keep you healthy in space, the start of a journey to find alien life. And then last but not least, 8, Western values will have been tested to the breaking point.
Mm-hmm. Which ones?
Yeah.
Like,
which ones are we seeing here?
Are we talking like, you know, the American dream style? Like, you know, you have your home, you have your nuclear family, white picket fence kind of thing, and you know, you work your whole life and then you retire. Is that the value that you're talking about breaking? Because I mean, the whole title of this thing, if you read it, it's "You'll own nothing, be happy," which is their mantra. And it was funny because I was doing some more reading into the Great Reset, and that is the crux of it. And it's funny because when you think about in history, when you had large populations who own nothing, they were not happy. Like go back to, you know, back in the European times when I made the allusion earlier to the serfs. So you had, you know, one lord who ruled over the area, who owned all of the means of production, owned all the land, owned everything. And the serfs were allowed to live there, provided they provide some level of work. And they didn't own anything. They didn't have any autonomy. They had to work in order to survive because they had to live off of what was given to them. And that's what this screams. Like that's it's like you've got a few powerful people who will, you know, own everything, you know, the BlackRocks, you know, State Streets of the world that will own everything. And you just have to subscribe to whatever it is there and hope that you make your way through society somehow and, you know, don't disrupt the status quo. Mm-hmm. Like it's worrisome watching that.
Yeah. And that's kind of where it comes back to the point of what we're talking about now, where they talk about, obviously we'll see refugees just increase, and we'll see in some cases borders overwhelmed, and Western values tested to the breaking point. I think that's where we're starting to see, as you see even in the States, their southern border just being overwhelmed with migrants. We have Canada, who's just put really no cap on their immigration and brought in everybody.
And encouraging immigration.
Mm-hmm. And which has led to testing our systems and what more can we handle in terms of our healthcare and our education and, you know, so on and so forth. As our public systems is being tested to the brink, housing. We're starting to see this all come to fruition. Again, this was posted in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
We're here now in 2023. We're starting to see a lot of things that were talked about in this video starting to come to fruition.
But none of the fun things. Like, where's our, like...
I want the drone.
I want the exploration to Mars.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Come on, Elon.
Yeah, get on it.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's kind of what happens now, right? Where, how do you, if America was number one and you want to try and displace them and have kind of a more distributed structure of power across countries, America's just not going to give that up. How do you get the American people to back down? Or I think we're starting to see it. Overwhelm their everything, get people really frustrated, and just see the breakdown and chaos and decay of society is what we're seeing before our very eyes. Our systems are being overloaded. Their systems are being overloaded. And then people are getting angrier and angrier and angrier. And sure, the Israel-Hamas conflict was a kind of a big powder keg in a lot of ways to kind of ignite a lot of the anger people have been feeling. Feeling, like you said, they don't feel listened to, they feel ignored by their governments, and they feel like they have no say in what's going on. Thus, they're just doing as they see fit. Which brings me back to this. How does someone get control? How do they gain more control? Because no one's just going to hand it over. Well, most times how people get control is the citizens tell them they can have it. That's how you do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what we're starting to see. I think we're being overwhelmed, being frustrated, being angry, and now we're just asking for it to stop. Someone, please stop it. And in a lot of cases, we're going to ask our governments to stop it, which is going to encourage more control.
Mm-hmm.
There's your social credit system. There's your CDS,
CBDC.
CDBC. These are the things that'll be introduced and brought in because we asked for it, because we just wanted the chaos to stop. Don't believe me? Let's go to 9/11. What was the direct result of 9/11? What was introduced?
All the TSA regulations.
The Patriot Act was introduced. And then by the Patriot Act, there's 4 key provisions in the Patriot Act. Surveillance, which was the act enhances the ability of law enforcement to conduct surveillance, including wiretaps and monitoring of electronic communications. Number 2 was searches. It allowed authorities to search homes and business records without the owner's knowledge through the issuance of national security letters. 3, there's information sharing. The act facilitates increased information sharing among various government agencies to improve coordination and counterterrorism efforts. And number 4, immigration. It includes provisions related to immigration, allowing for the detention and deportation of non-citizens suspected of involvement in terrorism. That number 4 was highlighted heavy after 9/11. We'll take care of the brown people for you. Make sure it never happens again. That was the message being permeated in media at the time. And people were begging for it.
Mm-hmm.
Please don't let this ever happen again. Do whatever you got to do. And as I said, I'm not going to fall for what happened back in 9/11 this time around.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to fall for treating people differently because they look different than me. They believe something different than me. I believe there is commonalities, and we can take our Canadian values and we can do that all together. I'm not going to fall for it this time. I'm not going to beg for the government to make it all stop. I'm going to go out and do it on my own and love people for who they are, find the commonalities, and treat people with dignity, regardless of what they're shoving down my throat on social media or they're shoving down my throat on the CBC. I will always treat people with dignity, no matter what, because I'm never going to beg a government to make it all stop, because I know where this all goes. The Patriot Act was the beginning of it all, and they're trying to do it part 2 here.
Yeah, well, I think it comes back down to when you think about all the things that we've seen introduced recently, like the censorship, the push for traditional media platforms, that was like, we're doing this in your interest, right? And it's like, what do we see happen? We saw all these local media outlets who would add diverse conversation to the conversation, completely shut out, completely silenced. And so I see it now, like in all the ads that I have on all my different platforms for disinformation. It's like an opposing view is now disinformation. It's like, sometimes you're right. Somebody is out there being nefarious and putting out information that is not correct, that is purposely meant to mislead people. It's called a lie. You don't need another word for it. That person is lying to you. Disinformation. Like, that just kind of annoys me, just the wording of it. But anyway, whatever. Yeah, no, it's a lie. Call it a lie. But the problem is then what happens when your government is the biggest perpetrator of their disinformation, the lie. And so I think that, like, that's where I kind of have to almost do like this moral values check when I come back to it. I'm like, okay, what is it that I truly believe? What is it that I believe of people? What is my cautiously optimistic self saying about this? And is the information that I'm seeing credible? Is it, like, who gains from this? Like, when you trace it back and go upstream, like, who is benefiting from this? Who stands to win if you aren't hearing the other person's viewpoint? Mm-hmm. And it's tiring. It is effortful, but it's worth it. And I think that that's a big thing, is that, like you said, you have to love your neighbor. You have to put that compassion out there, because otherwise, if we all turn off, like, we're going to have things that are done around us and to us that we don't want. And so it's effortful, and it's frustrating, and it's tiring. And I think that, like, we're both tired from it as well, but you gotta keep talking about it. You gotta keep staying vigilant, in regards to how you're dealing with all this stuff. Yeah. And then again, like we said before, taking breaks when you need to, but don't disconnect entirely. Don't leave the conversation. Take a break, take a humanitarian pause. But yeah, come back to the conversation when you're ready, because we need you.
Yeah. And it kind of goes back in, we said about lies. Government will lie to be able to get their narrative across. I go back to the 9/11 example. Dave Smith, who is a well-known libertarian media personality, and he was on the Joe Rogan podcast, and he was talking about all the things that bin Laden hated about America. The 4 things he hated about America, and he was very clear about these things. This is what Dave Smith said. He hates America because they kill innocent civilians in the Muslim world. Number 2, he hates them is because they prop up brutal dictators in the Muslim world. Number 3 is they prop up Israel, who mistreats the Palestinian people. And then number 4, they've set up bases on the Holy Land on the Arabian Peninsula. But America turned around and told them, he hates us because we're free. Not a point did that ever happen. And then you turn around and be like, are you trying to advocate for Osama bin Laden? Like, no. What Dave Smith says is, just know your enemy. Mm-hmm. Know what they're actually mad about. And maybe also take a look at maybe what you're doing and stop it. Yeah. So these are some points just to think about when I'm not ever going to fall for this us versus them type of nonsense. Sure, there are times where there's good and bad guys. Don't get me wrong. But there is so much to the conversation, and our social media era has distilled the good and bad so quickly for people that they try to jump on whatever side. They want to be on the right side of history. I was just watching the Taylor Swift documentary last night. And that was when she was talking about the phase where she was debating if she was going to get public about politics. And one of the phrases she used is like, I want to be on the right side of history. Yet everything she was talking about was things that were kind of twisted in media of things that she was believing. But that phrase gets thrown on so much. I want to be on the right side of history. Be on the right side of history. We're all good people here. We all want to be on the right side of history. But especially in this day and age, you have to be critical of everything that comes across your feed so that you can actually be on the right side of history, whatever that means.
I was just going to say that I don't even know what that means anymore. I think I'm going to be on the side of history that's not advocating for people dying. So if that's the right side, well, that's where I'm at. Mm-hmm. But yeah, as far as like who gets to write history is, I've heard it said like the person who's the victor writes the history book, and it's like, that's true. And they're going to put whatever spin they want to put on it. Right. So it's challenging is all I can say. Is it's wild. It's challenging. And I keep coming back to that idea of locus of control. It's like, what is in your control? What's in your control is how you respond to these things, how you internalize it, how you let that lead you through the world, whether that means that you look at this stuff and say, this is a tragedy, this is awful. However, I know that down the street, I have 2 people sleeping rough. I have people trying to use the Dartmouth community fridge and there's not enough food in it. It's, don't try to go fix your neighbor's yard when your yard's a mess. And our yard right now is a mess. There's people in tents in it. So, you know what I mean? Like, that's within our locus of control. And I think that what happens is that when you start focusing on some of these things that are actually within our control and are in our sphere of influence, that kind of spreads outwards. And so that's just where I have to put myself, because otherwise we start making enemies out of friends and family. We start, believing whatever we hear because one person has put their spin on it and it sounds pretty good. And I mean, I've fallen victim to that on different occasions where I've looked at something and be like, yeah, that's totally true. And then I go back and do some research or have somebody else throw a fact at me and I'm like, oh crap, my entire worldview was wrong in this situation. And like, we're always going to get it wrong every once in a while. Like that's part of being human. And I think that people should be allowed to get it wrong, because that's part of the experience. But again, bringing it back to the idea of like, what is actually within your periphery that you can taste, touch, smell, and feel for? Because I think that when you're talking about conflicts and issues that are like hundreds of kilometers, thousands of kilometers away, like we have no concept of what is happening there or what is needed even. So I think that like, if we wanted to take a page out of the super liberal book, it'd be like, don't be the white savior trying to like go on social media and think that you can solve it all. It's like, no, we need to work on the problems that we have here in our own homeland. So that means like, when you hear about somebody who wants to go spray paint a swastika on a synagogue, tell them that's not a good idea. Let's maybe not. Or, you hear somebody like throwing out some like Islamophobic rhetoric, be like, why do you think that way? Like how many people do you have in your network that are actually like, a Muslim person? So like, have you spoken to them? Do you know them? Because I'm telling you, it's hard to hate up close. I love that phrase. That's straight from Brene Brown. Like, it's hard to hate up close. When you get to meet people and you know people and they're there in your life, really hard to hate them. They have to be pretty bad. In that case, maybe they're worth it. But in all honesty, so again, bring it back into what is it that you can actually control? What is it that you can actually do? And I'm not buying it that social media platforms are the way to go, because I think it's exhausting us all and it's wasting our time and it's just performative at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I think that's a great way to wrap up that segment. 100%. That's like, it was the first 35 minutes of the show, but I think it's spot on, where there's a lot of chaos that we're seeing in our periphery. Don't fall for it. Don't fall for the chaos. Don't fall for the hatred. And because at the end of the day, as you said, there's going to be things that happen around us that we didn't want necessarily to happen, but because the way we reacted, it caused that to happen. And where does the show? Just to make you aware of what's happening, and catch you up on what's been going on. We're just two guys just chatting about these things. And that's just our opinion. It's not gospel truth, but that's how we feel. That's what we believe in. And that's how we're going to carry out our lives, especially when it comes to these problems, as much as it can be hard at times, because as you said, it can be hard on the head. It's difficult, but the future of your children depend on this, on how you react in these moments. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But CMHC, eh?
No, I know.
Oh, yeah, that'll take a hard turn on that one.
Yeah.
Canadian Government Housing Organization builds just 12 homes in 8 years, falling 98% short of their target. Woo!
Okay. How is 12 homes 2% of their target? Like,
that's right.
That's the part that I think is wild. And they're like, it falls 98% short. And you're like, oh, wow, that's bad. And you're like, wait a second. How sad was this goal if 12 homes was 2% of the target?
Seriously, right? Yeah, they're saying, and this is from Blender here, it says the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Association has acknowledged the need for improvement in addressing affordable housing issues after a program aimed at building 672 homes in 7 communities resulted in only 12 completed homes in one community since 2015. The same time Trudeau stepped into office.
Mm-hmm.
Gee.
Yep. But I'm sure they got their bonuses this year, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're doing a really good job.
Yeah, they're fighting the good fight out there, aren't they? Yeah, it's that stuff's heartbreaking, right? Where this is the type of stuff we're talking about, where it's the fragmentation of society, where no one's has any hope in any of our institutions because of crap like this.
Mm-hmm. You know where you find it, actually? I'll fight back against that a little bit.
Come on, let's go.
So you find it in your nonprofit organizations. They're like totally stretched beyond capacity. Like a lot of them, people are just like having breakdowns. Like I've had conversations with people because of my connection into the nonprofits like world. Call me up, like full on crying on the phone, talking to me. It's bad out there, but yet they still keep going, which is like, to me, like that's perseverance, that's diligence, that's compassion, that's love for people. And to me, that's inspiring, because you see these people who are like literally working with the scraps at the bottom of the barrel and still making amazing things happen. So And a lot of times that's because of like just sheer perseverance and willpower to get out in the community and get the community working together and trying to rally troops that are burnt out, that are tired, that have been lied to through different media sources, and getting those people to like show them where they can have input. It's those nonprofits out there, those community level organizations. Right now, I was saying before the show started, there's a group, United Way. Oh my goodness, I couldn't believe I forgot them. Yeah, so the United Way is actually working on a community land trust project. And so that's actually going to create deep affordability in the housing market. So that would be something that would be nice if CMHC threw some big money at. I know they've got a small CMHC grant to do research into how they might do this, but like actually put some money out there so they can start building, which would be nice. Because they have the connections, they have the resourcing now, and they've done a lot of good community work out there to try and figure out what it is that people want and how people want it. So they're putting together, and I sit on an advisory committee for that. And so seeing the good work that people are doing with that, that's inspiring. So I was like deathly ill 2 weeks ago, sitting in my tub, just like marinating in water, just like dying. And I had the Zoom call going with myself, obviously not camera turned on.
Gee, that kind of show, huh?
Yeah. Not one of those, liberal candidates that show up naked.
Oh, gee.
Anyway, yeah. So just listening in, providing feedback where I could breathe and speak. But like just seeing where they're at and the amount of work they're putting into it, that's inspiring. So there is like these pockets of really good work happening, but it's not at the CMHC level. Like definitely not.
Well, it's funny because seeing that from the CMHC, I wasn't surprised, but I was surprised only because this is some good news as well. I've been in talks with a builder here in the province who is actually working on a project in conjunction with the CMHC to get X amount of houses built, but a very different type of project. Not just like we're gonna get we're building these houses and you can start. It starts at 400,000 and you can do that. What they're doing actually is they're building affordable homes, kind of in that looking to that 250 to 400 range is what they're looking at. And then what they're doing is essentially giving it to people who want to buy a home and essentially doing a lease to own situation with them, where the builder just builds it and then releases something along the lines of 5 to 10% of equity back to the owner every year. Mm-hmm. And they're working on a project with CMHC with something along those lines to do that here in Nova Scotia, where you can finally get home ownership accessible to people who otherwise couldn't have the 20% or even the 5% up front. To make it happen. So I thought that was a pretty cool project that's about to get started.
Yeah. My only thought is because I've heard of projects like that, like Hamilton does a good job of doing that, where they have built, again, community land trusts, where they've built very expensive, nice homes, sold them at a premium, and use that premium to offset the cost of an affordable home that somebody else purchases at an affordable price. And I was like, oh, that's kind of actually a really smart model. So the people who can pay larger amounts, they pay the larger amount, and that offsets the people who can't pay. And so then you get a really good mix of people in a neighborhood as well. And then it's actually promoting home ownership. My only challenge with all this is that if we don't do something with mortgage rates and with lending and stuff like that, it's still going to be prohibitive to people. Because you can have the 20% down, because that's the part that I thought was interesting. Because in my friend group of people who are all, come from middle income families, all university educated, a lot of them have their down payments set. They have a 20% down payment. They just can't get approved for mortgages because the amount of money that you need to be able to qualify for these mortgages and the amount of money that you have to set aside each month for mortgage payments is just beyond reach for them. So yeah, it's interesting, but I think that we need a little bit of a banking overhaul as well.
Would you say it needs a great reset?
Oh, but of course,
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And we should probably get those people who are in the top banking positions to probably design that for us, because that would probably be a good idea. We definitely want the people who created the problem to find the solution for us.
Oh, yeah, we're here for it, man. We're here for it. Absolutely. No, it's well, I think I'll bring up one last thing before we end the show today, which I thought was interesting. Was what we tweeted this out this past week. And the problem, as you mentioned, the premiers met up last week, and so Premier Higgs came out and said Justin Trudeau's Liberal government's jurisdictional creep, bypassing provinces to send money directly to municipalities, is an unfair pressure tactic and often creates duplicate processes. Federal, provincial, and municipal governments need collaboration on housing and other files so that we can work together to solve issues. We are basically asking for the same consideration that Quebec has to deal directly with the federal government on provincial funding initiatives. And that came up from Blaine Higgs, Premier Higgs in New Brunswick, and we retweeted him saying, "We have to admit, the relationship between the premiers and the federal government is getting to a point of being near untenable. Where do things go from here? What happens?"
Mm-hmm. I love that he called out Quebec too, though, in that, because you know that Trudeau is the representative in Quebec, also our prime minister, and the Quebec premier. He deals directly with him, and it's like, is it again the proximity to power kind of situation, which they very blatantly called out when they got called out about the carbon tax, and they were like, "Oh yeah, elect more Liberals, and then you'll get special handouts too." Because like I just keep looking at Quebec and like different things that they have in place there. I'm just like, how? They have better supports for parents. They have like certain grants and special monies that go out to families who have children in Quebec. And it's just like, why isn't there that kind of funding to families across Canada? Quebec has done a really good job of these things. And so if I was a Quebecer, I'd be very proud of my provincial government as well. But it's just like, when we talk about equity and division in our country, like, this is not equitable, and this is causing division because people are looking at it and going, why is it that you can get this here and I can't get this here? So I find it really funny that he like actually called out Quebec on that, because I think that's exactly right. Totally. Because there is inequities between the provinces, and it's brutal. And it's funny because even like the talk about CPP and Alberta wanting to leave, the thing that keeps striking me is that it's like, how many Atlantic Canadians go out there, work their big Alberta job for, most of their working age time, pay into the CPP, then come back to Atlantic Canada to retire with their family. And so Atlantic Canada then bears the burden and the cost of a person who's now out of the workforce, not contributing to provincial income taxes. They are only using provincial services because, oftentimes there's problems like heart disease and diabetes that's run rampant, and like problems with working in industrial sites where there's not a lot of like safety because you're young and it doesn't matter. But now that you're old, that's compounded over decades. So our healthcare system bears that cost. And so when I think about like Alberta going, we need to have our own APP, and it's like, yeah, but like, how many people are coming to your province to work there, pay into your CPP contributions in Alberta, and then draw it elsewhere? It's just like, I find the fact that we have these divisions amongst the provinces really challenging if we have this much free flow between them. Because like I said, apart from Quebec, like, we need to have equity. We need to have things be equal amongst the provinces. And
you're
so
using two terms there. Clear that up. You said you want equity, but you want them to be equal. What's that? Explain that.
So, yeah, I guess the challenge there is that, like, because you think about people who live in different provinces, you should have equal access to healthcare, to benefits, to programs, regardless of the province that you're in. So if I'm a parent in Quebec and I get a certain amount of money because of, having children, I should receive the same amount of money if I live in Nova Scotia, or if I live in Alberta, or if I live in BC. That to me is equity. That's what's equitable.
Right. That just seems equal to me.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It seems like you're using two terms that are like interchangeable that are different. So that's like,
okay.
How
would you define them?
Equity is essentially you are changing the rules on various, say you're changing rules in Quebec that you are for Alberta just to make sure they have an even playing field. So say that Quebec is actually, in this case, it would be a better example. Alberta provides more to the global economy through their oil than say Quebec does. Quebec has electricity, but Quebec still takes money from Alberta to fund their programs. That would be the definition of equity, because you're manipulating things so that people have the same access. I don't think that's equal.
Okay, so because like I'm thinking like maybe you could manipulate things a bit to give people equal access to things. Because I'm thinking like the fact that one province has a bunch of oil under it is just by luck of the draw. You know what I mean? And it's like the other part of it though is that like other provinces need to do better at like actually using the resources that they have so that they're bringing something to the table as well. Like you think about like Saskatchewan's bringing grains and food to the table. PEI is doing everything it can with its potatoes. They only have a population of like Bedford, you know,
Right.
150,000 people, but they're doing what they can. The fact that their province is kind of like something that I've joked around with friends from PEI being like, you just need to like join up with Nova Scotia and just become one province. Because the fact that your own province is kind of laughable. But like, it is.
Wow.
I think Vancouver Island's bigger than PEI.
Is it?
Yeah.
Dang. Like population-wise?
In population and land mass.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Gee.
So it's like,
All right.
come on, guys. But that's a whole other topic. But, you know, like I said, though, like more provinces should be doing more to develop their resources. And there should be, I guess it just all comes back to the idea of like actual leadership at the top. If people at the top are actually leading from a holistic view of like, here's a country, what are the resources in different places that we can activate and share and use as a country, rather than, you know, we're Quebec, we're special, and we're Alberta, we also think that we're special. Like that's what I'm getting at. So that like maybe you're drawing more from one province one year and drawing more from another one the next year, but everybody in Canada has equal payments and equal benefits, and equal access to things.
That's fair.
So equity and equality.
Oh, gee. Trigger words, man. Trigger words. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, so that's kind of where I come to, right? Where, yeah, every province needs to work on whatever resources they have. It needs to be on them to develop those things. And when that happens, then I can get behind the idea of sharing resources and trade between provinces in some ways would be great. But the idea that's been happening for generations now is Alberta does a bunch of work and then Quebec just takes money from them.
Yep.
For what? Because Quebec doesn't share anything that they have with anybody. They keep it all in-house.
Well, they're special.
That's the problem, right? Is like, that's the issue. That's kind of the problem we're having.
Yep.
You know, so that's kind of more so why people are like, well, equity is BS because Albertans are getting the screws put to them because Quebec needs payments. Well, let's make it equal. Quebec, you do your thing. Alberta's going to take the resources they have and do their thing and live with what we got. Equal treatment instead of favorable treatment to make sure that there's equity across the provinces.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is that I don't think, because of just the patterns of movement right now that we have, I don't think you can do it that way.
Get good, bro.
Get good?
Get good. Get good. Be better. Provinces should be better.
Right. I totally agree with that. But you know what else it takes? It takes time.
That's
right?
true. Yeah.
So you need time for those investments. And then you also, like I said, you just need a leader that has a nationwide vision of like actually collaborating between provinces and things like that. Like, good on Timmy for hosting all of the provinces at, you know, Halifax to actually like be like, let's be on the same page. Like that man, like I keep singing his praises, and I hate that I keep singing his praises because he was in our office the other day and was walking around, was actually like a decent person. I was just like, you know what? Good for you, man. Like, I like you. Good job. I'm a little annoyed that you still haven't adjusted our income tax rates, but you know what? I have to swallow that a little bit because at least I think you're a decent human being and you're doing what you can.
This man's thirsty, dog. Thirsty. Awesome. No, that's totally fair. I think that's a good conversation, man. I think it was a good episode. Good show for the homies. Do you have any final words before we part tonight?
Yeah, I wonder what people's thoughts are about like what it is that we should be doing to create more unity in our communities, in our country, between provinces, because that's really kind of the crux of this whole thing, right? Is like, how are we working together, whether that be through like trying to create unity around social issues, whether that be through trying to force, carbon tax exemptions for everyone, whether that's come together to, do whatever in the benefit of Canada and its population and its values. Like, what is it that you're doing? What is it that we all can be doing?
Totally.
And is there anything that you're doing that's working right now that we can learn from?
Yeah, I think those are great questions. I think in that same vein, we actually had some great feedback from Thursday's episode last week, which I thought was awesome. Market Manager Mike coming in hot says, awesome episode. And Jennifer is someone I follow closely. Even my wife doesn't follow politics closely and listens to Jennifer because she's unbiased.
Mm-hmm.
He really appreciated that episode. And then she foran said, loved it. It's awesome. And then that on top of others on TikTok and Twitter. A lot of people really liked the episode. Jennifer really brought a lot of great value. Really appreciate having her on the show, and I'm glad that it was valuable for y'all. And we're gonna try and make more of that happen. Just bring some like really well thought out people in politics. Come on the show and have a chat.
I know. I've got a couple of people in mind that I hope we can bag.
Will Timmy?
No, I'm not thinking Timmy. I'm thinking some other people though that may have worked with him. So
Okay.
Yeah.
Good stuff. That'll be fun.
yeah.
Dude, we love it. Well, whatever it is you're doing, whether you be working out
Whether you be volunteering at a nonprofit
or playing video games with the homies, taking out the jabronis, whatever it is you're doing, wherever you are, we love you. We're out. Peace.